Welcome to Crotone Entertainment. If it's Monday, it's Morphin time. I'm Chris, and I'm joined by
Bree.
And we're also joined by Emmett tonight, our dog. You're going to hear click-clacking in the background because it's raining and it upsets him while we paint Goldar. We're going to jump right into painting Goldar, so here we go. The most important part to Goldar is the undercoat. I use this titanium silver from Rust-Oleum with that little pistol grip.
Which is awesome.
Super important for Goldar. I sprayed the whole model with this silver and jumped right into my Citadel Known Oil wash. I know this is going fairly quickly, but I like to keep the videos in that 15 to 18 minute range, and really speeding up this opening was the only way to do that. I know I've also said before the primer doesn't matter. I usually go with a light gray. You can pick your favorite color. In this case, it matters.
It matters if you're gonna achieve the level of color with him, because I mean, as we all know, he is the shiny gold blue monkey.
Yes, the gold monkey. Well, it's not just that. It's actually I've used several different silver sprays in the past, and they just don't work right. They don't do what I want them to do. They either get overly tacky, or they obscure detail, or they don't apply correctly.
You know what, though? After you mentioned that to me the other day when we were talking about the different stuff, the different primers you used, I actually looked up why.
Okay. Well, let me repeat the name of it because I said it quickly earlier, and you can tell us why. So it's the Rust-Oleum Universal Advanced Formula Metallic Paint and Primer Titanium Silver. Specifically the titanium silver. This is the only silver I've ever used that I'm happy with coverage on these PVC style plastic figures.
So here's one of the things that I learned, because little tidbit into Bree, I used to actually manage a hardware store, and I learned about paint. And paint became kind of a hobby for me.
We just got joined by our other dog here. Our other dog, Zara, just ran in the room. Like I mentioned earlier, it's raining, guys, so they're really nervous, so we haven't locked them out of the room like usual, so you can probably hear their pitter-patter of feet on our hard floor.
Yeah. So anyways, one of the cool things about paint when you're doing an aerosolized, I did not say that word right, but aerosolized paint, is that
I interrupt you one more time because we're about to jump out of this, and this is what Goldar is going to look like with that Known Oil wash.
I love that his tail is on this model.
Yeah, you like that? What this is going to do, this wash is going to go ahead and add a depth to the next color, because we're going to go gold by using our Citadel Contrast Nasdrag Yellow, and we're going to paint this over the silver, and we're going to do it in what I'm just going to call blocks. And what I mean by blocks is I'm going to paint like this foot, then I'm going to do the next foot, and then the leg segment. And the only reason I'm doing that is because as the contrast starts to dry, if I go over the same area again with more contrast, it's going to create this really just overly dark yellow color that doesn't look as metallic. But when I do this just over the silver, I get a nice gold effect. It's bright, it's shiny. It's my favorite way of doing gold. Nasdrag Yellow over this titanium silver. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so aerosolized spray.
So when they do the aerosolized sprays, one of the things they have to do is figure out a way to make essentially shiny bits of metal, because that's how most metallics are made.
Correct. And it's not actually a metal. It's right. I heard the name of it the other day. I forget the name of it.
Yeah. So to make those stick the way that they want to, they actually have to add more binding component than you usually would in any other spray paint.
So it's the same stuff, but with more of it.
Yes, which is why it stays tacky, and why you have to do something like put a wash over it like you did with an old oil.
Well, most of the silvers stay overly tacky. I'm going to sing the praises again of this titanium silver, because this gets a little bit of tackiness, but as soon as you put a wash or another paint over it, that goes away completely. So we're going to time skip ahead to where I'm almost done with the gold here, and you can see as I go just section by section, I'm doing this gold, we're getting this really rich, bright, gold color on Goldar.
Cool. I like it.
Like I said, that's my favorite way of doing this. But anyway, there you go. That's why you want a specific metallic. And I imagine that binder is going to stick to different surfaces differently too, because I painted metals and plastics, and these are a plastic, but they're like a PVC plastic.
Right. Well, you're going to find that on most, and this is from working with paint in general, at the house paint side, you're going to find that most oil-based paints stay tackier on metals, and that's one of the things about Rust-Oleum is it's still actually one of the few oil-based sprays out there.
Not to be confused with like a tester-style enamel oil.
Right. Very different when you're talking about oil and paint. There is like the tester-style oil paints, that's a different ball game. This, they actually use the oil because it aerosolizes better than any of the latexes will.
So I'm pointing at a couple things here. I'm pointing out all the details we don't want to be gold. The face, the wings.
The wings.
I went back and painted over all of those with my Citadel Gray Sear. So now I can apply additional paints over that. So we've cleaned up the gold. I did that off camera. Yeah, I did that off camera, and we're going to jump into our next color here, which is going to be Once again, our Citadel Abaddon Black, the same thing we use for all the bases. As usual, I dip it heavily in water, then dip it in the paint, then start applying it. It looks like a hot mess because the plan is to do 2 or 3 coats.
Right.
Thin coats are better, if possible. Thick coats right out of the bottle can be obscuring. So if you can thin your paints, do it. You don't have to do it excessively. You can just dip your brush in clean water, then dip it in the paint. That's how I normally do it unless I'm going for something really drastic. So this is kind of all over the place tonight.
Yeah, a little bit. Sorry.
We got a ways to go, and I'll keep stopping to talk about what paint we're going into next. But I think the topic we should probably talk about today, since our painting episodes have kind of become watch me paint while we have almost a mini podcast attached to it, is Game Masters.
Ooh, your local, your friendly neighborhood GM.
Friendly neighborhood GM. So anyway, we got our Blood Angels Red contrast paint coming out next, and this is going to go over everything, and I'm going to drop the mini. This is going to go over everything on Goldar that should be red. So he's got kind of like a red loincloth. He's got red gloves on underneath his gold plate. He's got red pants on underneath. You know, you don't want all that gold getting into that, blue monkey balls, I guess.
Fur pinched in metal would not be comfortable.
Really not something I should be saying on the channel.
No, but think of that. If you
anyway, so I'm using it'd be terrible. Well, I don't have that much fur, but so anyway, we're using a smaller tip brush, and we're just kind of painting it exactly where we want it to be. If you screw this up and you get huge swaths of red on your gold, it's going to turn orange.
Yeah, it will,
and you're not going to be able to salvage it. But the Citadel Iron Breaker is almost perfectly colored to the titanium silver with a Nuln Oil wash. So if you do get any on the gold, just repaint that segment of the gold with Iron Breaker and go back over it with the Nasdaq yellow and you'll have it.
But be really careful putting the Nasdaq yellow on at that point, because again, you might get that weird, if you let it layer too much, you might get that weird too dark gold.
Well, you should be fine over the silver if you let it dry fully. Which is a common mistake people don't do, is they don't let metallics dry long enough. Metallics take longer to dry than other paints. But anyway, Game Masters. Every group has a Game Master.
You are ours.
It's true. I am our group's Game Master. And that's not necessarily referring to a game that requires a Game Master. It's not your Dungeons & Dragons or your Pathfinder. But every group tends to have the person who
learns the rules.
Well, everybody flocks to. Now, that's not to say it's a popularity contest. It can be the most grading person in the group. It's just generally the person who, A, has the most rules knowledge, 2, spends the most time considering games outside of actually playing them, and 3, in some cases, has the materials. Because in some games, not everybody in a group is going to buy them. Not everybody in a group needs to buy them. We don't need our whole game group to buy this game in order to play it.
No.
We just need one focal point.
Yeah.
So your GM, your Game Master, your Dungeon Master, your Grid Master, if you want to call that here.
Ooh, Grid Master, I like that.
Grid Master over here. You've got that player in every group.
Yeah.
So why do we need that player? But before that, we're going to jump into our next color. We're going to be this Citadel contrast. It's a blue. I think it's called Talisar blue. I don't know. I bought it without the label to try to help our local game store because the label fell off and they're like, we don't know if we can sell this without it. So I said, screw it, I'll buy it. But we're just going to paint this on anything that's going to be blue on Goldar, which I interpreted as just his face because his tail has fur on it. And we know that his kind of like hair things coming out there are black. So I actually did his tail black. That's an artistic choice on my end.
I think it is black in the show.
I never really looked at his tail that closely, and I couldn't find a great reference photo for it, so I just went with black. So once that blue is on there, I don't know how much time we're really going to be talking about Game Masters here. Then once that blue is done, we're going to be going to our contrast black, and we're going to hit all those black areas, which is going to be the wings. It's going to be those weird ponytails or pigtails that Goldar's got going on, his mullet there, and his tail. So we're just going to paint our black on there using a relatively small brush for these smaller areas like the tail. And we're going to go to a bigger brush to do the wings. But we're going to work on that for a minute. And that's going to give us some depth as well because there is some texture modeled on there.
Yeah.
So you're going to see it when it's dried, kind of the extra texture it gives us to make life easy. So what is the point of a Game Master, really? Not just to run a game. You don't need somebody to run a game of Heroes of the Grid. Especially if everybody's played it, you're not playing Mastermind mode. So why do we have one?
Well, I mean, there's the psychology that I could all get deep into. If there's always kind of the leader of the group.
It's only going to be a 17-minute video.
Exactly. I don't want to take that there. But honestly, I think having a GM is always kind of a good idea for a group because it does give most groups somebody to turn to for the final say-so. Because let's face it, people aren't good at truly making good decisions. There needs to be somebody who drives the discussion, or otherwise it goes completely off the rails.
Now, that's not to say this person is leading the group. Well,
No.
Not controlling the group.
No.
They're leading it in a facilitatory fashion.
Right.
How many times have you gotten together with games with your friends and you say, hey, what game do you guys want to play? And everybody just stares at you.
Yeah. Oh, I mean,
how many times will nobody make an effort to get a group together until that group's gridmaster jumps in and says, hey, how good is next Saturday for everybody?
Yeah.
So your gridmaster is an extremely important part of your group.
Yes.
It doesn't seem like it, because if everything's going right, nobody notices what a gridmaster's doing.
Well, I think now, in the time of the pandemic, we've actually realized just how important gridmasters, game masters, DMs, you name them, are.
Oh my goodness, our group has largely collapsed due to the pandemic and not being able to get together, and it's been like pulling teeth to start pulling them back out of their caves. It's been extremely challenging. But like I said, if everything's going well, it doesn't look like a game master does anything at all.
No.
If everything's going poorly, that GM, that grid master, that game master is pulling their teeth out trying to get things back on track again. And I'm not trying to convince anybody to become a grid master, and maybe everybody watching this is the grid master in their own group. But if you're not the grid master, so we're going to jump back here to our Null and Oil, and I'm just going to go over his face because I really wasn't happy with how the blue did his face.
Right.
So I'm doing the Null and Oil on his face just to push a little darkness into the recesses so we can pick something out in a minute. Actually, it's going to be a flurry of activity till the end, so I don't know how much more we're going to talk about game masters, but I guess what I'm getting at with the game master, if you're not the current game master in your group, maybe think about everything that oils your game, and maybe thank your game master every once in a while. I guess what I'm getting at, because I don't know if we're going to get back to it because we're really bad at podcast videoing. But anyway, we pulled out our Evil Sun Scarlet Red. It's a Citadel layer paint. And all I'm doing is taking the high points of all of his red cloth and just putting a little bit on there. There's not that many. This is
because, like you usually say, he was good to begin with when you just had finished him there with the face.
Yep.
But this just gives him that little extra.
And even this is not as far as we could go. If I really wanted to, I could pull out 3 or 4 more reds and we could really highlight it up. But I'm not going to. It's not worth it for what he's here for. He's not here to sit on a shelf and be a display piece. He's here to play a game. So I'm looking for just the highest points, and I'm just dabbing a little red on it. And you can actually see here. You'll see it in the photo of him at the end, but you can see the darker red down in the recesses and that lighter red up above. So we're going to jump just right into the next color again. And this is our Blue Magic game color paint that we've used in other videos with the Rangers. Yep. I'm trying to recycle a lot of paints too, because I don't want somebody necessarily have to go buy 1,000 paints to do this.
Right.
And because I wasn't happy with the blue, I'm just going over and picking up the high points on his face. So kind of his mouth area, around his nose, his cheeks right under his eye, his chin. I'm just hitting those with just an itty bitty little dab of this blue paint, and it just creates a pop. That's all it's going to do. It's not in-depth highlighting. It's not difficult. And then we're going to go over to our dead white, because those little... I was going to do an off-white for his teeth, but those little spikes or claws at the end of his pigtails there, those are very clearly white in any show reference photos. So I went ahead and said, let's just make it all white. And we got a fine brush, and we just look for where the raised area of the teeth are, and I'm just putting a dab. I'm not coloring the area in between the teeth with something more realistic than blue. I'm not doing anything special with these spikes here. I'm just putting the white on. I'm leaving a little bit of the gray sear right where it meets the black, but otherwise I'm just painting it white and calling it a day. That's it.
Yeah, I remember you talking about, you didn't necessarily want to do the teeth really white.
So there's that iron breaker I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
On the sword, and you can hardly tell, a little bit of the yellow did get onto the sword itself. All I'm doing is touching it up.
There you go.
I'm not going over the whole sword. The sword, the titanium silver plus the wash is fine. Is it perfect? No, it's fine. It's good tabletop quality. So we're going to jump back, and there's a couple more revisits I'm going to do here. But this is Skaven Blight Dinge. It's kind of a dark gray with a hint of brown in it. Mm-hmm. And I decided to give the slightest whisper of depth to the wings. So what I did is I took this more broad brush here, and I dipped a little paint on it, and I wiped most of it off. And I'm doing a quick dry brush on the feathers. I'm trying to do just a downward stroke, just to grab what little texture there is. Now, these textures aren't tremendously sculpted into this mini, so it's not grabbing a whole lot, but there is just the faintest whisper of this brownish gray on the tips of the feathers that's not on, like, his pigtails or his tail.
Right.
Just a little extra, like I said, a whisper, a hint of color. I just kind of did that for funsies. There's no real reason. I do go back to the Evil Sun Scarlet in a minute. I took this Thousand Suns blue, and I decided to do his gems with it. He's got a couple gems. on him. He's got one right in the middle of his chest. He's got those ones up on his wings. He's got the ones on his sword. Without doing anything complicated, I decided to hit those with this. Depending on the reference photo, there's actually reference photos, and I think this is the difference between the Japanese and the American costumes. There's reference photos where those are red, there's reference photos where those are blue, and there's reference photos where they almost look green, but that might be the lighting. So I just decided to go with a bright blue.
So I have a crazy thought on that,
Sure.
actually, because we had talked about that earlier, and I had a crazy thought on that. Could it be who his leader is at the time?
It could be, but given the fact that once Lord Zed's staff was actually repaired with duct tape on camera, I don't think they gave it that much thought into the costuming. But anyway, I went back to the Evil Sun Scarlet, and we're doing a little dab of red on the eyes. It was a really low-quality production show. I don't think they thought that much into it.
You don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty... You can see duct tape on Zed's staff in an episode, the episode with the Dark Rangers. It's literally duct tape wrapped around it. And it's on the head of the staff, too. It's not even hidden. It's at his head level. It's terrible. So anyway, we're going to do the rim here, and I have picked Screamer Pink from Citadel to do all of my bosses, because I think that's the color that's probably the closest that I have to the color on the boss cards. I'm going to go back and hit like Lord Zed and Lord Drakon with this as well, and future bosses are going to get this color too, because I've decided to go ahead and make them match the colors. But this is basically it. This is going to wrap up Goldar, a very incomplete conversations about Games Masters.
Maybe I'll pick that up later, because I think that's a good one.
Maybe we'll expand and do a more podcasty style episode in the future. Maybe an unedited paint that we just talk over.
Yeah.
But anyway, once we get that done, we are basically wrapped up with Goldar. We are going to seal him with matte varnish when this is done, because all this contrast paint can rub off with overhandling. So I always seal these with matte varnish. And if this takes too much shine away from your gold, you can take a little paint on satin gloss and paint it on and get that shine right back. I actually have already varnish them. I don't have to do that. But that's going to wrap us up. Like and subscribe for more Morphin Monday. We're going to be back with a special, interesting technique video next week. Please join us.
Bye!